Welcome to Helping Members Report Accomplishments, a webinar for leaders in the AmeriCorps VISTA program. Collecting data on the VISTA project activities involves everyone on the project to create a clear picture of the project's impact. Today's webinar will address ways leaders can support and guide members in capturing their accomplishments and ways to establish reporting protocols to improve overall data quality. I'm your host, Bethany Dusablin, a Senior Learning Design Consultant with Education Northwest, a partner of AmeriCorps VISTA. Our main presenter is Andy King, a Senior Training Specialist at AmeriCorps VISTA headquarters. Andy plays a large role in supporting VISTA leaders, not only through this monthly webinar series, but also through his work on VISTA Leader Orientation and the VISTA campus. We'll also be hearing from Judy Dudley, a VISTA leader, a little later in this webinar. Andy, let's start with you.
Thank you, Bethany. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk about how VISTA leaders are integral in reporting on their projects' accomplishments. And these reports are something that AmeriCorps counts on to show our impact in the country. So let's get started. This session focuses on helping you in 3 different areas. First, you'll be able to describe essential AmeriCorps VISTA reporting needs and why they matter. Next, you'll be able to identify expectations around member data collection and reporting. And finally, you'll be able to identify effective practices that leaders can use to guide and support their members in reporting. The webinar is organized into 2 sections. So first, we'll start with foundational reporting information, starting with why reporting matters and what happens to the information that you collect. I'll give an overview of the types of data collected for required VISTA reports and look at some common mistakes that tend to show up. With that foundation, we'll shift focus and discuss the roles VISTA members and leaders have in reporting. We'll look at ways to use reporting tools to standardize the process and show ways leaders can guide and support members in submitting high-quality data. Okay, so let's get started with some foundational information about reporting on AmeriCorps projects. And to get us started thinking about this topic, Bethany is going to introduce our first activity.
Thanks, Andy. We'd like to open this first section by first hearing from you. In the chat, we'd like you to respond to the following question. Why does high-quality reporting matter? As leaders, you have a role in reporting, but why do you think reporting matters to your project and AmeriCorps? So that everyone can see your answers, select everyone before you submit your idea. Okay. Okay, we've got the first comment in here. If you can't measure, you can't change it. It justifies our existence as VISTA members. Funding to share exactly how each VISTA site impacts their aspect of poverty, helps tell a story, it captures performance measures, accountability, sustainability. Information is used to build on other future projects that may be needed. It evaluates success. It helps you see need for improvement. Quality collection means proper usage of resources, identifies gaps, helps VISTA keep track of what it's accomplishing. It makes known what's happening. It celebrates work, it validates work, sets direction, evaluation and accomplishments. Really great ideas in here. Andy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. These are all great ideas. And they seem to fall in a handful of categories, maybe. So one is about, reporting being a way of documenting, right? If you don't write it down, it didn't happen kind of thing. There's also a number of you talked about accountability, right? That we have to justify what we're doing. We have to talk back to our funders. We have to, sort of prove our worth in a way. So some of that accountability there. So we talked about being able to demonstrate and publicize what you're doing. So, maybe in marketing or outreach, or being able to attract people to your cause based on what you're measuring. And there were a couple of other categories as well, but really great responses here. So thank you for sharing all of those. We're going to take a closer look, in addition to all the things that you talked about, but we're going to look at why reporting matters. So you touched on many of these reasons, but just to sort of wrap up the conversation, I want to look at a few things about why reporting is so important. As some of you said briefly, if you accomplish great things but no one knows about them, it's almost like it never happened, sort of like that proverbial tree in the forest. So through reporting, members, leaders, and sponsors document and communicate their accomplishments and show what the members have done and the impact that they're making in the community. Reporting also measures progress towards results. So sponsors, as well as the AmeriCorps agency, can see whether the project is operating in accordance with the rules and is making adequate progress towards the results that were laid out in the application for the VISTA project. VISTA reports also give sponsors an opportunity to identify challenges that have come up and that might affect the project outcomes, and identify what assistance is needed so that AmeriCorps can develop appropriate resources. And finally, the information in these reports helps tell the story of AmeriCorps. Information from reports is used across the agency to share program successes near and far. So let's take a quick look at one version of the general flow of data in the AmeriCorps reporting system. Of course, it may work a little differently at different projects. So if you're not familiar with the reporting process for your own VISTA project, you'll want to check with your supervisor. So to start out with, VISTA members perform their service and they collect information on their service activities, keeping track of their progress and outcomes, and they document their results. And then they can pass it along to the VISTA leader, assuming the project has a leader. And VISTA leaders have two main roles. First, they support members in collecting data and reporting it. Then they compile the data and check it for errors to make sure that the data quality is high. They also report on their own service activities, and then they organize the data so it's easy to review and share it with the overall supervisor or project director. And then the project director analyzes the data, comparing it to the project plan and the milestones that were set out for the project from the beginning. The project director is also the one who writes the official report and submits it to AmeriCorps. Once received, AmeriCorps uses the information internally in a variety of ways to measure and evaluate its programs, inform its leadership and stakeholders, develop resources and technical assistance, and to plan for the future. We at AmeriCorps also use the information from reports to tell the story of AmeriCorps to a variety of audiences. Of course, Congress, as the appropriators of funds that support AmeriCorps, is very interested in knowing what's being achieved. Likewise, the White House wants to know what's being done. So those are two priority audiences. Beyond that, AmeriCorps shares its results with other federal agencies, the media, and the general public. So that's a bit about why we report and where the information goes. You might think that the handful of numbers you track don't amount to much, but when you combine the accomplishments of members and leaders all across the country, the results are pretty impressive. Here's an example of the VISTA program results from the past year, which VISTA projects reported to AmeriCorps. Without accurate reporting, we wouldn't have these figures. And since each of you has a hand in helping to record the great things that AmeriCorps is doing across the country, I'm curious to know what kinds of things you're tracking.
Okay, so we'd like to hear from you again. In the chat, we'd like you to respond to the following question. What types of data does your VISTA project collect? As leaders, you work with members to report data, so please share the kinds of data you're requesting from members and currently including in reports of any kind. So we've got monthly impact stories, attendance reports, in-kind donations collected. Those are all really, those first ones are great. Volunteers recruited, service hours, in-kind cash donations, again, volunteers recruited and managed, dollar amounts from grants, volunteers again, success stories, more grant dollars, volunteers, tech jobs created, donations, youth served, volunteers recruited, CQI goals, AmeriCorps webinar, orientations, conferences, reunions, so development activities, more number of volunteers, lots of volunteer numbers being collected, some community outreach, trainings received. We asked members to report on data, development, volunteers, resource recruitment. Yep, supervisors and leaders can better support them. Right, community outreach, veterans served. We have some specific populations, impact and training. Improved academic performance, individuals with improved financial knowledge, individuals that report increased food security. So some of those are focused on your project specific focuses. Andy, what stood out to you?
Yeah, well, probably a lot of you noticed that there's a lot of similarity, right? A number of you mentioned money raised and volunteers recruited, and that's not by accident. Some of the other responses here were around specific project outcomes, right? So if you are a financial literacy project, then you're going to talk about the improved financial knowledge of your program participants. So yeah, so thanks for participating in this activity. Let's take a look at what AmeriCorps asked VISTA projects to report, and that might help explain why we saw so much similarity here. So many of you probably already know pretty clearly what AmeriCorps wants to get. But for those of you who are newer to the topic, I'm going to quickly review what it is that gets collected. So the information that AmeriCorps collects falls into two categories: numbers and narratives. The numbers, which represent some standard measures of what AmeriCorps members are doing and what the project itself is accomplishing. The narratives provide explanation of those numbers. So, starting with the numbers, what numbers are you expected to track? AmeriCorps VISTA projects are expected to report on things like member development to capture the amount of training and skill building that members are receiving in various areas. We also collect member activity information on numbers of community volunteers recruited and the number of hours those community volunteers performed. Likewise, we want to know how much money the members raised, as well as the dollar value of non-cash contributions that they generated. So this is obviously why we saw those things appear so much in that last activity. Each AmeriCorps project selects specific AmeriCorps performance measures that are relevant to the project. And for VISTA projects, those are capacity building, as well as anti-poverty measures, as well as specific beneficiaries served, like youth, veterans, substance abuse programming recipients, homeless people, if applicable. So your supervisor or project director will be able to tell you what the specific performance measures are for your project, so you'll know what data you need to collect. So that's it for the numbers, but in addition to the numbers, there's a narrative section to some of the reports. And if the numbers tell us what happened, the narratives answer the question, so what? What do those numbers mean, and what can they tell us? The narrative is the place to explain the numbers and to really bring them to life. So this is where the project can describe their successes and indicate the impact the project is having. This is especially important for things that are hard to represent with numbers. For example, a VISTA project may have a goal of creating a strategic partnership with a state agency. Even if they're wildly successful, that partnership gets reported numerically as a 1. The narrative gives the opportunity to describe how that partnership expands the organization's services from one city to statewide. The narrative is also the place to talk about challenges that have come up, changes in the environment that weren't expected, and what the sponsor plans to do in response. Here too, the sponsor can describe training or technical assistance that might be needed from AmeriCorps. So let's briefly look at the main reports where your data shows up. There are 2 main reports that VISTA projects submit to AmeriCorps. I mentioned this really only to give you some context for the data that you and your members are asked to collect. The first report is the Project Progress Report, or PPR, which allows the sponsor to report on things that are relevant to the VISTA project. It includes numbers and narratives on project activities and results. So there's a section on performance measures, which reports on the numbers in a more detailed way and compares them to targets that the sponsor has set for the project. This report, the PPR, is submitted 2 or 4 times a year, depending on the project. The other report is the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, or what we call the VPRS. This one is strictly numbers, and it collects the same data points from all VISTA projects. It looks at 4 areas: community volunteers, resource development, capacity building, and the number of people helped by organizations that were supported by VISTA. The VPRS is done once a year, and it reports on the previous fiscal year. And remember the numbers we saw just a moment ago about all the things VISTA did over the past year? Those numbers came from the VPRS. So now that you know a bit about what AmeriCorps is looking for, we'll take a look at what we sometimes end up with. In reviewing my reports, some of my colleagues from the regional offices and here at VISTA headquarters have identified some common reporting issues. Since leaders and members are collecting much of the numerical data, let's look at some issues relating to the numbers in reports. First is the issue of double counting, which can happen easily if you have more than one VISTA member working on a project or an event. Say there's a community outreach event where you have 2 members who are recruiting community volunteers. If both members report all the volunteers recruited, and you add those together, then you'll be double counting. Another common issue is numbers that don't align from one section to another. Using the volunteer example, one project reported that members spent 300 hours on effective volunteer management, but then they showed 0 community members were recruited and managed in the demographics section. And then in the performance measurement section, it says there were 75 volunteers recruited and 40 managed. So this is an issue with the person writing the report, but it's essential to have well-organized data to begin with to help avoid this kind of error. A third issue that comes up is that of very high numbers that are hard to connect directly to member activity. A project that has 5 VISTA members reported almost 300,000 youth were receiving services supported by those VISTAs. It's hard to see how 5 VISTA members could have supported services for so many individuals. There are also some issues that come up with the narratives. First are narratives that don't report, there are narratives that don't support the numbers in the report. As an example, a project reported 50 youth mentor matches that were sustained and 50 students improved academic performance. But nowhere in the narratives under stories or partnership collaboration did the project highlight this. Another common issue is a report narrative that doesn't explain the zeros in the report. So it's hard for us to interpret a report where several sites have 0% progress listed and there's no explanation why. Is it because the members aren't doing anything? Or because the members are doing something other than what's captured by the report? Or is it a new site and they don't have any members yet? Without a narrative, it's hard to know. A third general issue is a narrative written with a member focus rather than a project focus. It's easy to see how this happens, right? Members submit their narratives and the supervisor just pastes them into the report. But that's not what AmeriCorps is looking for here. The narrative should be written from the perspective of the project. Is the project on track to meet its goals? What were the challenges for the project? And what resources does the project need to be successful? Again, these are issues that the project director needs to be mindful of when they're writing the report, but a leader who's gathering the narrative information from members can help avoid some of these issues. So now that we have the foundation of what VISTA projects need to report on and some thoughts on how leaders can support that, let's look at specific practices that leaders are using. And to get us started, we'd like to hear what it is that you're seeing at your project.
To begin this second section about how leaders support members with data and reporting, we'd like to know, what are things you've noticed members struggling with related to data and reporting? In other words, what challenges do they face when it comes to submitting complete, timely, and accurate data? And what do they seem to need help with? And with you know the drill, just put it in the chat and click submit, and we'll be able to see your answers. Exactly what their impact story should include is the first thing in the chat, not double counting. This is Philip. They ask what's being looked for as far as the data they are to report on. Another one is underestimating how much they are helping. A clarity on virtual and digital touch points is another that comes up here. What tools are utilized to effectively track data? Okay, good question. How much detail to include is another thing people struggle with, another challenge. Not having access to data on internal systems. Impact narrative can be confusing for those doing remote work or particularly behind the scenes work. Christina says that she finds that if they aren't the sole responsible party for the numbers, they don't know if they are allowed to count them. Sort of some confusion about who reports what. I often have to educate on what they're allowed to claim. And then Avery says confusion around the terminology that's used to describe metrics. Okay, a lot of good answers there of things members are struggling with. Andy?
Yeah, so there are unfortunately a lot of challenges that you're seeing at your sites, and I think there's probably a lot of agreement among some of the things that you've called out. Yeah, there is, reporting can be new for folks, particularly with a lot of AmeriCorps members who maybe haven't had to do that kind of thing before, and so understanding terminology and tracking systems and counting and even just some basic data management principles might be something that you need to focus on. All right, so thank you for sharing where your members struggle when it comes to reporting. I think that gives us a good backdrop for this next discussion, which is on the roles that leaders can play in supporting members and assisting with the overall process of data collection and reporting. Leaders are broadly tasked with roles related to reporting, and this is, of course, going to vary somewhat from site to site, but there are some common areas where leaders can be helpful. They both guide and support members in reporting, and they manage the data. So as supporters and guides, leaders train members on their reporting responsibilities and their specific reporting processes at their project. They also support and encourage data collection, and they explain and reinforce the importance, that is the value of data collection. On the management side, leaders implement effective tools and systems to support data collection and reporting, and that includes things like spreadsheets or other documents and processes that are used to input and collect the data. Leaders manage the data by compiling the numbers from members and then checking for errors. And then the leader takes all the member report data, narratives, and shares them with the supervisor or the project director. So let's look a little more closely at how leaders train members on their reporting responsibilities and the specific reporting processes at their project. Training about the reporting responsibilities each member has should begin when the member starts. So that makes it a great topic to include in your on-site orientation and training. Clearly define for your members just what it is they need to be tracking. Provide clear definitions. A couple of you mentioned this, right? Definitions for all the data points so that your members are collecting the things in the same way. That training may need to include training on how to use the specific tools and systems at your project, right? The things for collecting data, storing it, and how the data gets shared. Your members need to use Google Sheets or Excel. If so, you might need to train them. And once members are trained, leaders can help ensure they're collecting the required data on a regular basis. Supporting data collection often takes the form of reminding members to submit their data. It's rare that people love to track numbers, so all of us need some encouragement and reminders to take care of this important, if uninteresting, part of our work. Even though the AmeriCorps reports are typically done once a quarter or a couple times a year, you're going to want your members collecting their data every week or two as it happens, so that nothing gets lost. When it comes time to compile the report data, you won't be able to go back and collect numbers from members who've already completed their service. So you need to make sure they're tracking it as it happens. Leaders may want to collect the data from members at least every month so they can check data quality and check back with the member while the information is still fresh. Encourage your members in creative ways if you can, and make it part of the routine. Include reporting on regular meeting agendas and add a note to your newsletters to encourage them to collect their data. And when they do submit it, reward them with praise, recognition, or treats if possible. The next role leaders can play is to explain and reinforce the importance, that is the value of data collection. Earlier, we talked about why programs report in general, and we looked at how AmeriCorps uses the information that comes from the reports that VISTA projects submit. Make sure the members on your team realize how far their data points will travel once they're in the reporting stream. Reporting is a fact of life in most workplaces, so it'll be useful for members to learn about it during their service. Helping them see it as a regular part of any job will benefit them even after they finish VISTA. And leaders can show members various ways the data they collect can benefit them. The old what's in it for me, right? Reporting can help members see the incremental progress that they're making, which can be motivating. Or they can include their achievements in their professional portfolio to be used later on a resume or a job application. So the three roles we've just looked at all focus on supporting members. Next, there are a couple of leader roles focused on overall project reporting. It's great to have members tracking data on their accomplishments, but if you're not collecting and organizing it in a standardized way, the information won't be very useful. So you'll need to develop standard reporting tools if they don't already exist. Ideally, the tools will allow members to easily capture their data on an ongoing basis as things are happening. The tools should also make it easy to collect and compile the data from all your members in one place. As the data come in, you'll want to check to see that all members have reported and that all the numbers are there. Again, doing this as it's submitted allows you to follow up in a timely way on anything that might be missing. You'll also want to check the data to see if they make sense. Look for outliers, numbers that seem too big or too small based on what you know about the project or based on other numbers in the report. Let's say a member reported building capacity at 90 organizations, but you know that they're only working with 9. Follow up with your member to validate the data and make any adjustments that are needed. Likewise, you want to look for duplicates. Say you have a couple of VISTAs working on fundraising, check to see whether they're both reporting on the same funding in their numbers, and if they are, you'll need to make sure that you don't double count. Finally, once the data are clean, you'll send it on to the supervisor or the project director. They're the one who will write and submit an official report to AmeriCorps, and they will also likely use the data in other contexts to share what the VISTA project is doing. All right, this is a good place now to bring in our guest speaker, Judy, so you can hear directly from a VISTA leader about some of the things that they're doing to ensure effective reporting at the project.
Great, thanks, Andy. I'm glad to introduce our guest speaker, Judy Dudley. Judy serves with Goodwill Industries in Northern New England in Portland, Maine, as the Reporting and Training VISTA Leader. What a perfect job title for this webinar. Judy supports a team of 18 members, VISTA members, with reporting, training, and a variety of other aspects. Prior to becoming a leader, Judy was the Strategic Institutional Research and Resource Development VISTA with the American Indian Higher Education Consortium's VISTA project at the Nebraska Indian Community College. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you, Bethany. I'm excited to be here and have this opportunity to share a little of what I've been doing to support my VISTA team in their reporting responsibilities. I've found that it's very important for members to understand their why when reporting accomplishments. But that also means that as leaders, we should understand overarching goals at the organizational level. I recommend the following. Read your organization's strategic plan to get the big picture. This will help you get oriented to your site and provide clarity about priorities. When I was writing grants at NICC, I was careful to tie every proposal to the college's strategic plan. We made it clear why the proposed project was critical to the college. Our proposals' need statements incorporated data. We had great success with that approach, an 80% success rate with more than $2.5 million in new funding for new projects at the college. I also recommend leaders ask for a copy of their site's proposal to CNCS so they can refer back to it throughout the grant year. It's really important to know what's been promised so that there are no surprises when it's time to deliver on those promises. And next, save a copy of your VISTA program's performance measures. These are the topics on which your project will report to CNCS in this grant year. So make sure you understand what the project's performance measures are so you know upfront and you can collect the right information. This can also be helpful in several ways, like describing your project in outreach programs, designing a lean and mean data collection tool for members to use, helping members maintain appropriate focus when they're making changes to their VADs, and maybe even in selection of new host sites. So after you know what you're supposed to report on, we come to delegating the what and the how many to our members. To support member reporting, here are some things that I do. First, I make reporting easy for members by creating or updating a tool that is simple and straightforward to use. I revised the form that I inherited to be more user-friendly, and I removed some things that we don't typically report on. The form went from 16 pages to 6, and the questions were grouped more logically, like capacity building questions have been separated from the anti-poverty outcome questions. Quantitative questions are mostly separate from qualitative ones. And it's early days, but we hope this change is going to make it easier for members to do their reporting. And I will say I've already received some positive feedback on that. I also review member reports at monthly check-ins. Before the meetings, I prepare and look at a member's report to see what they're submitting. I also review notes from the previous month's call to see what was discussed and agreed to around reporting. And if the member's behind on or their report has a lot of blanks, then I just ask why. For example, a report with a lot of zeros might indicate the member is struggling and needs some extra support, but it might also indicate that they were focused on one big task that month. If there are areas for improvement or they're telling me about service activities that are not showing up in their reports, then we discuss this so that they walk away knowing what they should do to provide more complete reporting results. Next, I train and troubleshoot as needed to get quality data and timely reporting from members. Our new member orientation includes a section on the importance of reporting. Our new member binders include hard copy instructions on reporting. Reminders with the link to the monthly report form are sent out every month. And I also recently held a lifetime screen share training in which I filled out the new version of our monthly report form with my own reporting results for that month. And finally, we ask for stories as well as numbers. At my previous VISTA site at the Tribal College, our monthly reporting form mostly prompted for narrative content, partly because storytelling is so important in Native culture as the way to share history and information. So I was asked to send stories and photos, and my reporting took me several hours each month. At my current site, we have open questions in our Google Sheet form to capture stories and narrative information for the report. Additionally, we require members to share success that they've had that month, and we encourage them to share additional stories from their site. But it typically only takes 10 to 15 minutes at most to complete the report form. So with this approach, we can include qualitative data in our reports to CNCS, and we can use member stories from the monthly report form for content in our newsletters and social media posts. And finally, it's really important to take time to acknowledge the wow. And by this, I mean sharing results can be very motivating and inspiring to members, and that helps further motivate members to provide high quality reporting results. Since our site supervisors are located at non-goodwill organizations, they were not necessarily seeing the data that their members were reporting. So a good practice is to share back the data that members report to us. And I now send raw data to members and their supervisors every quarter so that they can see 3 months of progress and use that for their own project planning purposes. This also gives members a chance to identify any errors that might need to be fixed. Another thing I do is report back to members on progress towards our collective goals. For example, I created the chart on the screen for our newsletter to show the progress on performance measures of some things that members are tracking so they can begin to see the impact they're having as a whole. These collective accomplishments helped me make the argument to get some free state park passes for our members, which I requested as a way to help maintain member motivation. And lastly, I spread the word about project accomplishments to members, host site supervisors, senior management here at Goodwill of Northern New England, and elected leaders. At our annual celebration of service in August, our VISTA project manager here at Goodwill, their speech included goal thermometers that showed we had reached our program goals for the grant year. And based on reporting results, I was able to provide, each member received a personal letter of recognition and thanks from Goodwill's CEO, Goodwill of Northern New England CEO, and also a personal letter from Governor Janet Mills, both of which included site-specific information and results. They also received a thank you card from Senator Susan Collins that was delivered to their host site. And in addition, our celebration included a statement of thanks from Senator Angus Kings, as well as a recorded video message from Senator Collins, who serves on the US Senate's Appropriations Committee, that cited our members' accomplishments. And that was all based on reporting results that I was able to provide to the senator's staff.
Thank you, Judy, for sharing so many examples and tips. I know these are probably really useful and maybe some things people hadn't thought about yet, and useful for your colleagues. When we were gathering information for this webinar, we had a chance to meet another of your VISTA Leader colleagues who shared some excellent information about how she supports members in data collection reporting. Tammy Moyer is a food security VISTA Leader for United Way Worldwide. Tammy wasn't sure she'd be able to make the webinar, but allowed us and wanted us to share some things that she does to support member reporting. So Tammy told us that she discusses PPR reporting requirements in the very first meeting with new VISTA members. Talking about it early is something Tammy did because when she was a VISTA, she didn't know about her reporting responsibilities until a few months in, or when she needed to report for the first time. And it was really stressful because she had to essentially go back and recreate her activities to fulfill her reporting requirements. And she didn't want this to happen to her VISTAs, and so she talks about it early. During the initial discussion, she provides the reason why data collection is required and important, and she shares their site's target for the year and makes sure to clarify if that target is shared among VISTAs at their host site. She also uses time in the meeting to recommend the approach they should take up front, such as logging activities weekly or for events right away, instead of waiting until the end of the month. Only after she's had a chance to talk about reporting and show each member the forms and tools they will use, does she then email the tools to the members. Tammy found that if members have a chance to talk through it in the first meeting, members were less overwhelmed by the tools. So Tammy also makes checking in about reporting a standing topic in her monthly meetings with members, as Judy does. At every required monthly meeting, her members sometimes feel they have nothing to add, so she tries to help them report their VAD and correlate what they're doing and where on the PPR it should be reported. And at meetings, she asks members about their targets and basically makes sure that they're keeping track of everything that they're doing. And she encourages them to take really good notes as well, so they can explain the numbers if they need to. Tammy also shared a little bit about the tools and processes she uses to manage data. In fact, she jumped on the chance to design tools and a process to streamline PPR reporting. To make things as easy as possible for her VISTA members, she created an Excel spreadsheet they could use to keep track of their accomplishments as it pertains to the PPR. She encourages them to enter their reporting weekly and within a day or two after an event they attend. Some of the members have decided to keep track on their laptops. Some print out the Excel sheet and write everything down. She also uses a Smartsheet form to collect official data for the PPR. The Smartsheet form includes site names and member names on dropdowns so they can tag themselves consistently. Her form contains all the categories that match the PPR exactly, so it's simpler for folks to transfer their numbers to the Smartsheet form. The fields in the forms are required, even if they report a 0. And the member form also has a required open field for, quote, project accomplishments and other AmeriCorps performance measures, just so she has a place where people can capture the narrative piece for the supervisor who has to write the report, because it's a place where they can add more details about their projects. And finally, when it's time to report the data each quarter, Tammy communicates with all the members and supervisors. She sends a link to the forms that they need to complete and includes instructions and the due date. The supervisor also enters data and narratives so that the person responsible for writing the report in eGrants has all the information they need. We thank Tammy for sharing her information and allowing us to pass it on to you. Okay, so we'd like to hear from you in the chat one more time to brainstorm and share practices. What additional effective practices around reporting and data collection would you like to share? We're pretty sure those of you who have been leaders for a while might have developed some effective practices, or maybe you've seen some used that you thought were clever, or just made people's lives much easier. Please put your ideas in the chat, making sure you're sharing with everyone. Okay, we have one in there. So far, we are using Encore, reminding members to record numbers, narratives, events. So Brenda's using more reminders and recording as you go for reporting, looking at your calendar to remind yourself of events you went to. This can also help look back. So using a calendar as sort of a trigger to get those dates, shared evaluation data dashboards where the team can input data. So like different kinds of tools people are using. We have both monthly and quarterly reporting systems. So the most of the quantitative data is collected monthly and both quantitative narrative data is collected quarterly. So people use Google Sheets, Google Forms. They give members the opportunity to fix mistakes, write everything down, always good. Journaling activities is also a great idea. Identify a VISTA partner to work with on recording numbers for events while the other member can focus on content, meeting, greetings. Okay, kind of dividing roles to help get those pieces done. Sometimes I record on my phone and message to myself in the moment of the event or engagement so I can refer and capture later. That's great. So kind of giving yourself, finding ways to give yourself reminders and to do that later. Keeping tangible records to share with those, encouraging Vistas to talk with their site staff to go through quantitative data. Okay, so like connecting with other people to sort of learn and do what they need to do. All right, excellent. Lots of great ideas. Andy, does anything stand out to you, or do you want to comment on anything?
Yeah, thanks, Bethany, and thanks for these comments. They're great suggestions and ideas. Obviously, some commonalities, tools and techniques, and the recurring theme of doing it often, do it in the moment. I love the person who said, yeah, I just put a quick note on my phone when it's happening so I don't forget, and then later, I can put it into the formal reporting. That's great. Also wanted to call out, we've been talking about the required reports that AmeriCorps requires of all the projects. But I think it's Stacia made a comment about keeping a good record for those who come after you, right? So there are lots of other really good reasons to keep good records, not just because you have to report them, but because you can use them to make things better or make things easier for the next person who's going to come along. So, so many great ideas. Really appreciate everyone who shared. All right, Bethany has one more question for you.
All right, so we'd like to, we have a final question that we'd like to share with you so we can see how well you've been following along. On your screen, you'll see a poll question in a pop-up, and the question is, which of the following is an appropriate way for a leader to support data collection and reporting? Is it to track data on behalf of members, empower members to design their own reporting tools, collect data from members quarterly, or provide ongoing support on how to use reporting tools? So make your selection and click submit, and we'll give you a little more time so you can have a chance to participate. All right, their answers are coming in. We'll give you about 5 more seconds to answer this. Okay. All right, we're going to close the poll and share the results here, or share the, how did we do?
All right, it looks like 81% of folks picked D to provide ongoing support on how to use reporting tools. Let's take a look. And yeah, that is the correct answer.
Yep, and as leaders, you won't track data on behalf of members or have members design their own reporting tools necessarily, or only collect data quarterly, but rather collecting and checking in more regularly as one of the effective way of an effective way to get accurate data, and to do that that we've recommended be supporting data collection. Thank you for responding to that, and we have a little bit more to go. So on to Andy.
All right, thanks, Bethany, and thanks for participating in that. As Bethany said, I've got a few recommendations here for further study on this topic. You'll find links to these resources included with the slides, and I think we'll drop a link to the slides back in the chat so it's convenient. There it is. Thank you, Mike. Let's see. So first, we have some VISTA resources. So for details on the 2 AmeriCorps reports that VISTA project submits, you can take a look at the reporting instructions for both the PPR and the VPRS. The third AmeriCorps specific resource is a monthly log and volunteer tracking document that came from the Iowa Department of Public Health AmeriCorps. And Judy, thanks for tipping us off to that tool. It can be a useful sample for other leaders to use to help create their own guidance around reporting for their members. Then we have a couple of other resources on managing and understanding data. So I need to give the disclaimer that these resources are not created by us, so this is not an official endorsement of these resources by AmeriCorps. So first up, Microsoft has a resource with recommendations on how to clean your data. Again, links for these are in the handout. And if you're interested in seeing some examples of performance measures, we suggest you review some of those that come from the Office of Management and Budget. And finally, I want to offer another recommendation that sort of goes in the other direction. So if you have a good resource or a template you use in reporting at your project, I encourage you to share it on VISTA Connect. That's the discussion section of the VISTA campus. And, your colleagues will be able to see it there and make use of it. So always encourage sharing on VISTA Connect. So with that, I want to thank you for tuning into this webinar. I hope you've gotten some useful information, and I want to thank you in advance for all that you do for the VISTA program and what you're doing to help bring an end to poverty in your community.
Thanks, Andy. This was a really informative presentation, I think. We'd like to know what you think. I invite you to complete a short evaluation of this webinar, and your feedback is important to us to make these sessions the most useful for you and other VISTA leaders. The survey is probably already open in your browser behind the Zoom, but if not, the link is also available in the chat. So we'd love it if you'd fill that out. Okay. Now it's time to see what questions you have. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will read those out. And okay, sending a link to the PPR instructions. I believe that's in the Andy, is that in the packet? The link to the packet, is that correct?
It is, yeah. So at the end of the slides, we just have one handout. The slides in the very end, the last page, has a list of all those resources I mentioned, and there are links there for the PPR instructions. You can also find them on AmeriCorps.gov. If you go in the top menu on AmeriCorps.gov is grantees and sponsors. And if you look in there for VISTA sponsors, scroll down, maybe halfway down the page, you'll see VISTA resources, VISTA supervisor resources, something like that. And there's a section on reporting, and you'll see the PPR and VPRS instructions are there. So
Yeah.
Avery, I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll answer them.
And I'll say we have Judy still online with us. So if we have any questions for Judy on the things that she's doing, I know she shared a lot of great practices. And, you know, I just have to say, while I have the mic, Judy, I'm so impressed. Like, you get not one, but both U.S. senators to acknowledge your members, like individually and personally. Amazing. And you get a video from a senator who's on the Appropriations Committee, of course, and that committee has to give money to AmeriCorps so that we can even run the VISTA program. All of that is just kind of mind-blowing. So kudos to you for all that good work, and congratulations on getting so much recognition. And I have to say, you know, when you get that recognition for your own project locally, it just reflects back well on the whole program. So I want to just say thanks on behalf of the whole VISTA project, VISTA program.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it looks like we have a request for Judy to share that video. You can get that. Another call for the PPR instructions. We got that. Let's see.
Yeah, so I see a question from Avery. She says, we're looking for definitions of the categories under VISTA member development information. For example, what's the difference between tracking systems versus IT? So there, tracking systems would be what it is you're using to track and report your data. So maybe you use a Google Sheet, you know, or you have a paper-based, whatever your process is, that that you're training your members on those specific number tracking and reporting processes. And IT is more general, right? So do they know how to actually use the network? Can they print stuff off? Are they familiar with how to use Google Forms, or to use a survey instrument, or, you know, whatever other IT tools that they need in order to do their work? So I think the tracking is more reporting specific, and the IT is more general. And yeah, I honestly, I don't know if that's explained specifically in the instructions. The other thing I'll add for you, Avery, and for anyone, if there are specific things in the instructions, reporting instructions, that are not clear, your project director can reach out to the portfolio manager at their AmeriCorps regional office to get that official clarification, right? So, so that would be the way to get an official response.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, we're at the top of the hour. Let's move to the final slides. And our next webinar for leaders is on direct communication for difficult conversations, and it'll take place on Thursday, November 10th. And we hope to see you there. I want to thank our presenter, Andy King, and our guest speaker, Judy Dudley, for such an informative presentation. And thank you to Tammy for sharing her story. And thanks to our production team, Mike Dietz and Steve Gray. And thank you for joining, and we hope to see you again. This concludes today's presentation.